Hello, and welcome to the webinar Prioritizing Relevance, Meaningful PE in the Early Years. Who am I? My name is Zach Smith. I've worked in early childhood education in international schools for 15 years now. The first 5 in the classroom, the last 10 in early childhood physical education. I worked for 9 years at Shanghai Community International School. The past 6 years, I've been at the Kaus School in Saudi Arabia teaching K1 PE. In this session, we will be going through some of my core beliefs in early childhood physical education and analyzing one of my most recent K1 units as a case study in order to explore the role of personal relevance in a meaningful early childhood PE program. I'm going to present strategies and beliefs that have worked for me in the hopes that you can take bits and pieces and apply them to be successful in your own contexts. I'd like to begin with this quote from Bill Gates. "The first 5 years have so much to do with how the next 80 turn out." The idea behind this quote, that our preferences, habits, and mindsets are formed during the early years of our lives, is why I am passionate about early childhood education. It's why I am sharing with you these philosophies and strategies I have developed over the years. And it's why every PE teacher, every teacher in general, and every citizen of our world should be invested in robust early childhood programs with a focus on personally relevant movement education. I truly believe that personally relevant fundamental movement skills lie at the heart of enriching early childhood programs. I also believe that enriching early childhood programs lay the foundation for successful academic careers and fruitful lives. So let's get started with an overview of my beliefs, which have been developed over my career, of course, as I have gained experience working with young children and come into contact with very talented and influential educators and researchers who have shaped me into the teacher I am today. But I would have to say that my skills and approach have fully blossomed over the past 9 years as I have become a father and watched my son, Elvin, there he is, grow and develop. During this time with him, I have come to understand the experiences children crave and need. Of course, there are many more things I believe go into a successful early childhood physical education program. In fact, there are too many to name in this short time frame, so I have focused on 3 major ideas. We're going to talk about the role of foundation skills in student learning, what they are and why they are a vital part of any ECE program. I want to share my views on environmental design in the gym and how I go about creating spaces that enhance learning and skill development. Also, I would like to make a case for the use of storytelling as a provocation in early childhood education, and how I go about using narrative devices as the key to engaging young learners and speaking to them in their language. So let's dive into foundation skills. In this context, we are defining foundation skills as the physical, sensory, language, and social emotional skills that all students need to be equipped with in order to thrive in the academic world and beyond. We could spend a whole webinar just talking about these skills, but that's for another time. In this session, I just want to provide a brief introduction to foundation skills and how they affect the way that I teach. My outlook on early childhood education and child development changed forever when I became aware of the book A Moving Child is a Learning Child by Jill Connell and Cheryl McCarthy. In this book, the authors posit that it is the body that teaches the brain to think, not the other way around, and they lay out their very detailed case using brain and child development research, beginning with the child's time in the womb all the way up to around age 7. They have developed the kinetic scale, comprised of sensory, vestibular or balance, proprioception or intuition, power, coordination, and control physicalities. The kinetic scale is an encapsulation of the foundation skills in an easily digestible recommended daily diet of physical experiences which shape children and move them on the path toward readiness. Readiness for what? Life. If we attend to the physicalities on the kinetic scale in a play-based setting, we can feel assured students will leave our program with the tools to learn and thrive. Another important part of a moving child is a learning child is an emphasis on directional language. These are the everyday prepositional terms that we throw around quite liberally, but which need to be experienced concretely so that they do not become abstract or ambiguous. I have been lucky to work directly with Jill Connell on 2 occasions when she visited our school as consultant, and the importance of these terms and the fact that PE class is an excellent place to explore them was part of her feedback to me. How do these foundational skills align with personal relevance? By viewing student movement and behavior through the kinetic scale lens, you can read the moves of a child, which gives an insight into their physical strengths and needs. This helps you guide them toward play-based activities that will support their areas for improvement. Also, it gives the teacher confidence in trusting the student's choices. Repetition is the learning driver in early childhood education. If a child is drawn toward repeating certain activities rather than covering a wide range of skills, you can safely bet that their body is innately guiding them to satisfying a fundamental need. In this way, you can feel good about trusting the child to make choices that are in their development's best interests. I also feel that the physical education environment should be carefully designed to support the program's goals. I am a big believer in student choice, which is a personal relevance driver across all grade levels and walks of life. Part of my design philosophy involves dividing the PE space into 2 halves. One is a relatively empty area where the students and I can move freely while discussing and experiencing big ideas, concepts, individual skills, exploring spatial awareness, and sharpening fundamental movement skills in a teacher-driven manner. The other half of the room is an area filled with purpose-built structures that encourage students to apply these skills in their own ways and on their own time. We could call these 2 areas the guided area and the discovery area. They are clearly divided by a wall of mats standing on their sides. We remove the walls when we move from the guided area to the discovery area. This allows the children to enter into the mindset of focusing on the different jobs at hand. On the right, you can see some examples of the discovery area, design ideas we have used in our gym in the past. We'll go more in depth into environmental design in the next slide, as well as the webinar's second half. I am always striving to make the discovery area as inclusive, creative, and provocative as possible. I'll give you a moment to read some of the questions that are constantly in my head as I design and redesign the area, and then I will highlight some key points. Inclusivity is a major factor in any PE program, but it's essential in early childhood where safety and supervision concerns are of the utmost importance. Of course, I try my best to alleviate any physical safety concerns that may arise, because when 15 3-year-olds are all making choices simultaneously with only 2 adults in the room, you need to have the peace of mind that they can explore and take calculated risks without the fear of injury. Emotional safety also comes into play. Do kids feel challenged, and do they feel cared for? I like to adopt a low threshold, high ceilings approach to design, which means that the structures have more than one use that can be accessed on any student's level. For creativity, I often use found materials in my space or mundane materials in unique ways. This maximizes your resources and allows for regular change. Of course, I also need to relinquish my control of the environment and allow students to rearrange to suit their needs, within reason, of course. A little extra work resetting the space is a small price to pay for student ownership over their learning. And provocative. The powerful PYP word, provocation, needs to be involved in environmental planning. What feelings, ideas, questions, or connections will the design inspire? Will the students be able to take the concepts that have been explicitly taught in the guided area, make connections to the structures in the discovery area, and apply them independently or with light guidance? These are all factors I take into consideration when designing the discovery area. I try to look at it with the eyes of a child as much as possible. This brings us to my last underpinning philosophy for now, the idea of using storytelling as a provocation. When I first saw the Meaningful PE framework, my first idea was to think back to my own childhood and ask myself, what are the most meaningful experiences I can recall from my early childhood? And now I ask that those of you in the audience take a moment to do that also. What are the most meaningful experiences you can recall from your early childhood? These meaningful early experiences could be physical or otherwise. Please take a moment for that reflection now. Ready to come back? I wouldn't be surprised if some of you had a hard time with that thought activity. I know I did. According to brain research, most of us suffer from what's called childhood amnesia. This is because the part of the brain that stores long-term memories is not yet fully developed in early childhood. However, some things do stick, the implicit memories. One thing I could latch onto was the feeling of story time with my mother. We also had audiobooks on 45 RPM records, and I remember playing those stories over and over again. Yes, records, and yes, I am old. Maybe you have had similar memories of stories, movies, or music from your early childhood. Many of us are steeped in overarching narrative archetypes from a young age. The seemingly nondescript youth who discovers something special, encounters and accrues partners, partakes in a mentor's teachings, and undergoes trials and losses only to arise stronger and wiser than before to save the day as a hero. If you've seen a Disney or Marvel movie recently, and you can safely bet that many of your students have, then you are familiar with the hero's journey. This is the language of childhood. It also neatly applies to the journey we go on when we undertake new learning. These memories and archetypes were the driving reason behind my goal of delivering each of 4 units this year in the form of a story, with protagonists and antagonists, minor characters, plot arcs, and narrative devices all connected to concepts learning engagements, and environmental design. The 4 images you see here are the title pages from each of the stories, which were delivered via Google slideshows and presented to the students day by day on smartboards. This year-long exercise served to increase student engagement because they became immersed in the narratives, invested in the characters' fates, and invited to participate. The content was delivered in a language that was relevant to them. Storytelling. So, now that I have outlined some core early childhood PE philosophies, I would like to move into action. How do these philosophies look in practicality in the context of a living unit in K1 PE? But first, I'd like to introduce the meaningful PE approach, developed as a result of a review of relevant PE scholarship and research in PE and sports programs in Canada and Ireland. The meaningful PE approach began, in the words of the team, as ethnographic research exploring future teachers' and coaches' experience of learning through an approach that positions meaning-making and personally meaningful engagement in physical activity as the priority goals of PE and youth sport. I have had the great pleasure of conversing with and being guided by the doctors Deirdre Nikroinen and Tim Fletcher as I work to apply the approach to my teaching and learning. So I want to give them and the rest of their team a big shout out and thank you. Also, I don't want to mischaracterize any of their work as I am still creating my own understandings around it. So I encourage you to visit their website, linked at the bottom of this slide if your interest is piqued. So here are the 6 features of a meaningful PE experience. Finding meaning through social interaction, just right challenges, having fun, increasing motor competence, personally relevant learning, and experiencing delight. As I tried to objectively examine my teaching philosophies and methods with my coach, it became clear that it would benefit my students to focus on one area at first: personally relevant learning. This quote encapsulates the personally relevant learning feature. For physical education teachers looking to facilitate personally relevant learning experiences, it is important to help students draw connections between what they are currently learning and how it can be used in their daily lives. I felt this was the area to focus on for me because of my philosophies, which I outlined earlier. I wanted to make teaching relevant to students' lives through developmentally appropriate pedagogical strategies designed to capture their attention and bring out their passions. Another aspect of personal relevance is the student desire to choose what and how he or she learns in PE class, which is also one of my core beliefs. With these ideas in mind, I would like to tell you the story of the Magic Soup Pot, a K1 PE unit about exploring creative expression through movement. In order to plan this unit chronologically, I created a unit timeline. This allowed me to visually demonstrate to myself when each concept and skill would be introduced and how they would fit together within the time frame I had to finish the unit. K1 is allowed to reduce to 4 main units during the course of the year under PYP guidelines, which allows us to go very deep. This unit ran from mid-January to mid-March, although we lost the last week in class due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The timeline served as the overview for where the unit was going. From there, I created the unit's storyline. At first, I didn't have a title or idea for the story, but I knew that we would be exploring a wide range of movement concepts, including body, actions, relationships, space, time, and energy. So, because the content was quite disparate, I thought that creating an anthology of stories organized around the conceptual lens of expression would be appropriate. All of the skills we explored during this unit could be combined to make up an entertaining story, just like the way a bunch of different ingredients can be combined to make a delicious soup. This called to my mind the folktale Stone Soup, which I used as the base story, introducing the unit to the students. From there, I began to create more and more stories in Google Slides. I think my slideshow ended up having 25 stories and 170 plus slides. Each of the stories had a title page so the students could recognize them later. Here are a few of them. Also, in the center of the guided area, the empty space I described before, we had a repository for the title pages of all the stories we told. This was the magic soup pot. It brings to mind the idea of traces, a Reggio Emilia-inspired documentation device meant to call the students back to earlier learning, reminding them of where we have been, even as we move forward, in order that the students might link their new learning to prior knowledge, or simply to be able to think back fondly on past experiences. We also use this as a driver of choice, which we will discuss later on. From there, I was able to make my daily and weekly plans, an example of which you can see here. You may notice the objectives for the week are clearly stated, and most things are linked together. The music and equipment go along with the story. The story goes along with the learning objectives, and the learning engagements link with everything else, including the kinetic scale focus for that period of time. Stories became a way to bring everything together when planning. During this unit, the students had a few different ways to make choices and also make connections to their learning in other areas of school and home life. Personal relevance. In the top left picture, the students in the magic soup pot are using their feet to vote for their most cherished stories. This vote decided which stories we retold and added to our expression mind maps. On the bottom left, you can see one student adding the mini title page to the mind map. The mind maps detailed how we express ourselves in the classroom, PE class, music class, and Arabic class. This helped to broaden the students' interpretations of expression and to make the PE learning relevant to other things they were learning in school. You can see 4 examples of different classes' mind maps on the right side of the slide. The environment's design also fit into the story and contained elements of personal relevance for the students. Each of these 5 areas, there was a 6th that's not pictured, represented elements of the stories and movement concepts. We had the mountain, on which the students could demonstrate their knowledge of high, medium, and low levels, the scales, which allowed them to explore weight transfer and balance, the pathways, which allowed them to explore straight, curved, and zigzag space, the caterpillar bridge, which allowed them to explore space and body extensions, and the cable cars, which allowed them to explore the kinetic scale physicality of power through core strength development. I introduced these areas slowly, individually, and consecutively over a few weeks. We studied the mountain in depth for a week, learning how to utilize it and how to be safe on it. After that, we introduced the scales and explored them. Then the children would be encouraged to move from the mountain to the scales in order. We kept going until all the areas were introduced and could be traversed consecutively, which ingrained some safety routines in the students' habits. We called this sequence the Traveler's Path, which was a link to the main characters from Stone Soup. Once the students were able to move in the same direction in order to make sure everyone would stay safe, we relaxed the rules about going to each area in order. We began to ask each student to identify which one was the most important for them. Important was the developmentally appropriate word we substituted for relevant. We wanted to know the students' preferences so we could collect data and see if their preferences were developing. We spent a lot of time analyzing the word important and linking it to their movement preferences. After a while, we were able to send the children off to explore the traveler's path on their own, simply by saying, "Please show me your most important place." The students' autonomy gave us a chance to gather data on their preferences and the trends we were seeing. Some students gravitated to the same place and played there endlessly, getting the repetition and enjoyment necessary for skills development. Others tended to prefer to go through in order, trying each different area in turn, exploring a wide range of physical skills. Since we teachers were mainly observers during this period, we had the time to assess and document student learning. Using foundation skills ideas, we could then pinpoint individual students and their fundamental movement skills of strength and need. During the course of the unit, we were also able to obtain some qualitative data from the students themselves via various methods, including student interviews, student drawings, and pictures taken by the students. Using the Seesaw app, we could even combine all three of these methods at the same time. I would like to share one student reflection with you now, as it made me feel especially proud of the Magic Soup Pot unit and its impact on students. You might hear a couple audio chops as I edited the student's name from the audio. So, what did you choose as your most important place?
This one.
Can you draw a circle around it?
Okay.
What is that? What is that?
A mountain.
And why do you think that the mountain is such an important place for you?
Because I can roll and I can roll like this and like that.
And when you roll, how do you feel? Do you feel
Happy.
You feel happy? And is there anything else that you want to say about the mountain?
Yeah.
What would you like to say about the mountain?
I say like I want to play with the mountain all of the drill, the world. I want to play with it.
Can you say that one more time? You want to play with the mountain all of the what?
All of the years.
Okay, nice. Awesome. Thank you. It really touched me to hear, "I want to do it all of the years." This is the kind of lasting impact we can make when we strive for meaningful experiences in PE. And although this talk has been targeted at early years PE teachers, I think this applies across the grade levels if we ask ourselves some key questions as we plan and teach. So let's review. You can ask yourself, is what I am teaching relevant to the lives of my students? Are the students empowered to make choices about what and how they learn? How will my pedagogical choices enable students to have meaningful experiences? And does the environment support the goals of the program? I hope and believe these overriding questions will guide you in your mission to deliver a personally relevant and meaningful experience to your students. So that's my story. Thanks again for taking the time to listen. I don't expect anyone to follow this model exactly. This is what works for me and my students. But what works also changes all the time according to the needs of the students. I hope you can find some jewels that you can apply to your context. If you have any questions or want me to share any resources, please hit me up on Twitter at Mr. Zach PE. Thank you. Thanks again.